So here we are at the end of 2017 and another year of gaming behind us. This year I played more games than I ever have before. I reviewed over 280, so it was really hard to dwindle it down to my favorites. So, for this year at least, I'm bumping up my top 20 to a top 30 games of the year. And even with that, I'm still missing a lot of great games that I know that a lot of you guys love that unfortunately I just couldn't get around to playing, big and small. So, of course I had to play it in order for it to make this list, but here we go guys, these are my top 30 favorite games of 2017. First up is the 10th line. This is a mix of a JRPG, platforming, Metroidvania hybrid, with a very interesting battle system to go along with these other cool features. The story may not necessarily blow you away, but the soundtrack is quite enjoyable, and if you're looking for a little bit of a twist on a retro JRPG, the 10th line is definitely worth checking out. 2017 could honestly be called the return of 3D platformers, but one of my favorite 2D style platformers this year was Splasher. This very much has a Super Meat Boy-esque feel, with a couple of interesting gimmicks using different liquids in order to stick to walls or platform off of them. Splasher may not do a whole ton new, but the overall fast-paced platforming is very fun, and if you're a 2D platforming fan, you need to give Splasher a try. The world of Tooth and Tail is a pretty brutal one. There's anthropomorphic animals broken up into different groups, and whichever one ends up losing the conflict is going to end up getting eaten. The game has RTS elements, and usually that doesn't work that well on console, but for the most part I was able to easily adapt, and the game quickly became enjoyable. The game has some balancing issues a little bit farther in, but the multiplayer aspects, if you're able to find some friends that know the game, can be a lot of fun, so I highly recommend giving a try the Tooth and Tail. If you told me last year I would be having a Call of Duty game on my 2017 best of list, I would probably call you a liar, but here we have Call of Duty World War II. Easily one of my favorite campaigns in a long time in the Call of Duty world. It very much brought me into these characters and I want to see the story through to the end. Of course the multiplayer is still a lot of fun for those who get into it, and there's a lot of modes of course, but it was really the single player campaign that got me playing the game and I very much enjoyed my time with it. Cat Quest is a very simple action RPG that newcomers to the genre could easily pick up and play. The game has plenty of quests and equipment that you'll be able to find, with a cute, colorful world, an anthropomorphic cat hero that slays dragons and other mythical creatures, as well as just an overall fun atmosphere to it that veterans of the genre or newcomers to it can easily enjoy for a few hours. I love the PS2 era of JRPGs, and Earthlock very much harkened back to those days in its look and approach to its turn-based combat. I like the characters and the world that was crafted here with some good music along the way. Each character has multiple stances with different moves, some of which will end up working better in certain situations, as well as I like the ability to stack enemies if you're able to get multiple to chase you, so that you can have a bigger battle and bigger combos to earn more experience. Overall, if you get a chance and you like the PS2 era of JRPGs, Earthlock is worth a look. Of course, I love retro games, and 88 Heroes was a very interesting one. You have 88 different playable heroes, some of which are great to control and other ones are absolutely terrible, but the game featured 88 different ones to play. Initially, you're not able to select which characters you want to play as, though as you play the game more, you'll be able to unlock new modes where you get more options. It's a very creative game. It's a bit on the short side, and some of the difficulty ends up stemming from the fact that some heroes just aren't that good. But if you're looking for an interesting new twist to a retro style game, 88 Heroes may be the one for you. I played a fair amount of 2D horror games this year, and Detention definitely stood above a lot of them. The game has a very dark atmosphere, and considering it's 2D, that can be difficult to do. It's set in the 1960s in Taiwan. You're stuck in a school, and there's a lot more going on than just the monsters that are roaming around, and a lot of mysterious things that are going on. Overall, if you though can play only one 2D horror game, I highly recommend it be Detention. With so many old games being revived through Kickstarter, it can be sometimes worrisome if they're going to turn out, but Mutant Football League very much brought back the classic Mutant League football to a new generation. The game has the same core gameplay, a very fun atmosphere that can be very violent with a lot of really cool plays, funny parody teams, and some great humorous commentary to go along with the game. Mutant Football League very much exceeded my expectations, and I very much enjoyed playing it. The next game I originally wasn't going to include, but after playing it in front of friends and playing it on my live stream, the reactions, this game I will never forget, and that is Everything. It's really hard to describe because there's not a whole lot of gameplay to it. You can control a variety of different things, almost anything you can control, from plants, buildings, to animals, small little creatures, to all the way down to molecules and even giant universes. The game is just a weird experience for sure. While there is a bit of story that kind of connects things, and you're getting these speeches that are read to you, and there's just a lot of thought going on as you're playing it, and you can get a lot out of it or absolutely nothing out of it. But Everything is one of those experiences that you'll probably never gonna forget. While it would be near impossible to top last year's Uncharted 4, Uncharted Lost Legacy is a pretty good addition to the Uncharted world. Yes, we're not playing as Nathan Drake, but the overall dynamic of the characters we do have was quite enjoyable, with some cameos thrown in here and there, and just overall elements that really tied it into the universe and made it still feel very much like an Uncharted game. While it may not be a sequel or something that will be the best of the series, overall Lost Legacy though is a very much enjoyable action game that's still worth your time. I played a fair amount of non-conventional rhythm games that I ended up enjoying this year, including Stereo Aereo and Metronomicon, but the one I ended up choosing for this list is Neon Drive. Each one of the game's levels, which unfortunately there's not many of them, have a different 80s feel to them, will very much remind you of classic 80s arcade games and other 80s pop culture in general. The 80s in general may start to get played out a bit, as we've seen with a lot of games with that kind of theme, but it still works very much here with Neon Drive, and is a very fun arcade-style rhythm game. While for many classic gamers, Super Metroid is considered the best Metroid game, but my personal favorite was Metroid 2, and when I found out they were remaking it, I was very excited. When I finally got to play it, it instantly became one of my favorite games I played this year. It still very much feels like Metroid 2 with a modern twist on it, some new mechanics that end up working quite well, and a few extra things that are included to make this one of the best remakes I've played in the last few years. Assassin's Creed Origin very much is trying to bring the series back, and while it has a lot of great elements, a decent story, as well as just a vast world, the Egyptian world that you get to explore is huge in Assassin's Creed Origins, it's still very much an Assassin's Creed game, and in fact in some ways it is even changed up more with the new combat system that not everyone's going to enjoy, including myself, though I can't help but say I easily put 30 to 40 hours playing through the game and enjoy very much of my time with Assassin's Creed Origin. After such a masterpiece with Outlast, it was going to be hard to top it, but Outlast 2 is still a very enjoyable horror game. It has a lot of very intense and scary moments, a lot of intense atmosphere, and some gruesome imagery throughout. The story falls apart in places, and while I enjoyed a lot of the game, it still necessarily wasn't my favorite horror game I played this year, but Outlast 2 is still very much worth your time. Mighty Gunvolt Burst is pretty much what Mighty No. 9 should have been. It's retro looking, it has some great action, a really cool weapon system that you can change out different parts, multiple playable characters, and it even includes the same bosses you fight in Mighty No. 9, just much more enjoyable battles here. This is exactly what they should have been focusing on, and I really hope that they end up going back and making a sequel to this, instead of making a sequel to Mighty No. 9. Any longtime gamer knows that movie-licensed tie-in games usually aren't worth your time, but The Mummy Demastered is one that is definitely worth your time, especially if you're a Metroidvania fan. This game is old school looking, it's made by one of the best 2D style of game makers out there in WayForward, and has an absolutely killer soundtrack. If you love synthwave, this is the soundtrack you need to listen to. The game has a few flaws. The health system can be a bit difficult, including also the ammo system, but for the most part, if you love Metroidvania games, you need to play The Mummy Demastered. I'm a huge Tekken fan, so I was very much excited to get my hands on Tekken 7. I was a bit disappointed with some of the extra characters thrown in, and I felt that it was an overall lackluster story, but the core engine is still very much enjoyable once they got the online working, especially so I could face off against people around the world, as well as just plenty of customizable options, and a decent roster, even if not everyone was included. While Tekken 7 may not be my favorite in the franchise, it was easily one of my favorite fighting games this year. I love the Professor Layton series, and while it's not as good since we don't have Professor Layton, Catriel and the Millionaire Conspiracy is still a very much Professor Layton game with a lot of great, intriguing puzzles and a talking dog, which I'm still not quite sure about, but overall the atmosphere, the world, and of course the puzzles were still very much a blast. There's no game I put more hours into this year than Everybody's Golf on the PS4. The newest entry in the Hot Shots Golf franchise, at least for me, very much delivered the same core gameplay of golf that I've always enjoyed. The interconnected courses that we've seen in some of the more recent entries is still a very interesting and enjoyable one, and even though I wish there were some more courses and the DLC wasn't quite as pricey, as well as just the overall leveling up system, as well as progression can be a bit slow, this still ended up being a very enjoyable golf game that I've sunk easily 100 or more hours already into. While I don't love it quite as much as I love Stick of Truth, I still very much enjoyed South Park Fractured But Whole. The superhero mechanic, the new, more tactical battle system was an interesting change that led to more strategy and I think a harder battle system overall than Stick of Truth, but all the references, all the humor, and just the overall enjoyment factor was so much fun playing through it from start to finish. One of the best retro remakes ever, Blaster Master Zero is an awesome game that any fan of the original Blaster Master needs to give a try. It's kind of a reboot as well as a remake, including some new elements. You have new bosses, new areas, new power-ups, and the DLC even that was included in the game is a lot of fun to play as extra characters. The core gameplay though is an absolute blast, destroying all kinds of creatures and some really intense moments that we never had in the original Blaster Master. If you can get a chance to play it, Blaster Master Zero comes highly recommended. This spot I may be cheating a little bit again, but I'm going to include two games, and that's Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami. It's hard to pick which one I like better, but I definitely think Yakuza 0 has a bit more bang for your buck, but both games are quite enjoyable, and considering Kiwami is just a remake of the original on PS2, it's a great addition here on the PS4. It looks good, it runs well, and both games are very much enjoyable 3D beat-em-ups with a ton of side activities and events for you to get involved in. You can easily sink 30, 40, or 50 hours into Yakuza 0 or Yakuza Kiwami, both well worth your time. Sonic Mania is the Sonic game that 2D fans have been waiting for a long time. The game has a lot of nostalgia, a ton of references, and just a lot of very fun classic Sonic gameplay. Plenty of secrets and hard things to achieve while also going through a longer experience than I thought it was going to be, with a lot more levels included, tons of throwbacks, a few new stages, and a very enjoyable soundtrack. Sonic Mania is one of the best Sonic experiences I've had in a long time. 2017 very much was a year of retro and remakes, and Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy very much feeds into that. The game is a remake of Crash Bandicoot 1, 2, and 3, and all three of them still play absolutely fantastic. These games look great on the modern age, great updated soundtracks, and the core gameplay is still very much intact, even with a little discrepancies with the hitbox and the overall landing of Crash itself. The games are challenging and difficult, and you will die a lot, but it's still a very enjoyable and fun 3D experience. This was linear 3D platforming done right back in the day, and it's still done right now. After the release of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns on the PS2, I was unsure if we would ever see a new Fire Pro Wrestling game, but we got one this year in Fire Pro Wrestling World, and it very much delivered exactly what I was hoping for. It's very much based on Fire Pro Returns, but with some new features and just the community options that we now have available in the modern age brings Fire Pro to a whole giant mass of people that never got a chance to experience it and now are absolutely loving it. The upcoming PS4 release is in the works. The game just recently came out of early access and has been adding new features, with new ones even coming in the future, leading this to be easily not only the best Fire Pro game ever, but one of the best wrestling games of all time. It took forever to get here, but it was well worth the wait, and that's Cuphead. This game was not only a great throwback to the 30s cartoons, but also a great throwback to run and gun games of the past like Gunstar Heroes or Contra. The game is difficult, but the right kind of difficult. It punishes you, but you quickly learn patterns and get better at the bosses, and when you finally do beat a boss, you feel accomplished for doing so. And it's something that not that many games get right, but Cuphead definitely did, and I really hope they make a sequel down the line. When I first saw it, Horizon Zero Dawn instantly had my attention, and it delivered on a very enjoyable open world experience. Aloy instantly became one of my favorite characters of this year, and the world that was there was a very enjoyable one to explore, with a lot to do, and of course the mechanical animals and lore of this world was very interesting to learn. Overall, Horizon Zero Dawn, including its DLC that was recently added, is just an overall very enjoyable experience to have, and I highly recommend checking it out if you have the ability to do so. It was hard to decide between this and the game I chose for number 1 for what was my favorite game of the year, and this one really came close, and that's Super Mario Odyssey. This game is so much fun to jump around and platform, with all kinds of new creative ways for Mario to platform and get around, along with a lot of old school ways. It feels like a pretty much updated version of Mario 64. It has a very colorful world, some great music, a ton of collectibles. I do feel like there's too many Power Moons, so that it doesn't really feel all that great when you get a new one, since you're getting so many so quickly, but I applaud the fact there's just so much to do in this world of Mario Odyssey, and it was very much worth the wait to get my hands on it. I'm probably the only person that's going to have this as their favorite game of the year, but Resident Evil 7 I absolutely loved. The Baker household instantly became one of my favorite locations in all of gaming. The Baker family themselves are insane, and I couldn't wait for each new interaction. I feel like the game can fall apart near the end with certain parts that are introduced and vagina-like last chapter, but everything prior to that was just so good. I replayed the game over and over again, beating each one of the difficulties, getting all the collectibles, and playing and reviewing every one of the DLCs that came out this year. Resident Evil 7 was a part of all of my 2017, and I loved almost every part of that, with a few minor exceptions with some story bits here and there. The thing is, the Resident Evil 7 for me revitalized Resident Evil. It did exactly what Resident Evil 4 did to the franchise back in the day. It'll be interesting to see where we go from here with the remake of 2, but as a Resident Evil longtime fan, I'm very optimistic to see what's ahead, which is something I couldn't say before the release of RE7. So, Resident Evil 7, you win my 2017 Game of the Year. So there you have it, guys, my top 30 games of 2017. Which ones do you agree with? Which ones do you disagree with? Which ones did I miss that I need to get my hands on? I know I missed a lot of big ones like Neo, Nier Automata, Persona 5, A Hat in Time, Life is Strange Beyond the Storm. There's a few games I'm currently working on that I just didn't quite get finished enough to be able to include them on this list, but there's just so many great games that have come out, and I think really a game for every kind of genre and every kind of gamer. Some big ones came out this year, so I think everyone could be happy with at least 1 or 2 games that came out during the course of this year. But anyway, guys, what was your favorite game of the year? I hope you had a good 2017, and I hope 2018 is even better no matter what it was. And thank you so much for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.